Hey everybody, welcome back to the Zen Perry Project. We have Sally Gates of TITAN to Tachyons. Thank you so much for being on the show. And that is the third time we did the intro, and I nailed it. So thanks for being on today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the coolest ways I saw, your whole band described is just like kind of a ethereal, kind of magical like thing going through the cosmos in a spaceship in a David Lynch film. What was the whole idea behind starting this band? Because you were previously in other bands, you're from New
Mhm.
Zealand. Kind of give us the rundown of how you got this band going.
Yeah, so most of my bands here in the States were started by other people, and so like with Geigen, that was the first one I played with here. I was on bass, and I was mostly just like a sort of hired gun live session player. Did a lot of touring with them, and then after a couple of years, I was like, I need to get back to playing guitar. And one of the guys from Geigen started Orb Weaver, so I ended up, jumping onto that as well. And um, so I was writing a little bit for Orb Weaver, like I would write, like my solos or like add some parts here and there, but it was mostly like their project. So after a certain point, I was like, I want to express my own voice, and I just need to sort of step away and take the time to figure that out. Um, and I was actually back in New Zealand for I think maybe 3 months, um, like in the middle of winter, and so I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do at that point, but I would just go out to the beach and just with a notebook and just kind of like write down ideas, and I was even thinking of having lyrics at that point. So um, I from that I came up with a lot of the song titles and just like the general idea of
What
what
were
the
you
music.
writing down? Were you writing down like lyrics or actually like notating stuff, or what were you writing down?
Mostly like random phrases, some lyrics,
What do you mean by like
but
writing out like the actual music of the phrases?
oh no, no, like literally just like words, like no,
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
like music wasn't even coming into it at this point. It was more
Gotcha.
just like, um, yeah, because I think at that point in time, like I was pretty burnt out musically, and so I don't even think I touched my guitar while I was there. And if I did, I was actually like learning. I think I was like learning some like old jazz songs or stuff that was just like completely different from what I've been playing, So it was just kind of like this total reset. Um, but yeah, and then when I go back to the States, I picked up my guitar again and I started writing and was sort of piecing things together. And actually, I happened to have this gig in Miami where it was like this sort of like noise free improv thing. And I asked this drummer, Devin, to play with me. And so we just kind of like jammed on that and then had a lot of fun. Then I asked him to start, working on the pieces that I've been writing. And we put together a demo right before I moved to New York. So then I actually came up here with like something to give to people. Um, and then those people end up being Kenny Grahalski and Trevor Dunn. So yeah, so one of the first shows up here, like we played The Star Thinker is Obsolete and then just kind of improvised for the rest of the set. Um, so this is turning into a really long story.
Oh, it's great.
um, yeah, so yeah, so we had that one gig, and then obviously, like they're both very busy people, and so Trevor was gone a lot. Like this was probably like 2018, pre-COVID times, and um, so Kenny and I were like looking for. We're like, okay, so Trevor's pretty busy. Like we should find another bass player, and I've been jamming with Matt Hollenberg a bit, like just the two of us playing guitar, and so we were out one night having drinks and talking about the bass player thing, and then he's just like, you know what, fuck it, I'll play bass. I've got bass six, and I was like, all right, let's do it. So
That's great.
yeah, it started coming together.
Hell yeah. So going back to, I mean, I have a lot to unpack there, but let's just go back to New Zealand. What was it like growing up there? What was the music scene like? What are some of your favorite bands? Because that's something a country I'm very unfamiliar with. I've been once, but it was just a
Oh,
layover. So what's the music scene like out there? What was it like growing up?
it was pretty amazing. Like looking back, I mean, you take it for granted when you're a kid, but like, um, the population was a lot smaller then. Like I think there were only 3 million people. So we're getting a lot of the Queen's background noise here. Um, but yeah, I mean, we grew up like we spent a lot of time on farms and at the beach and exploring, and like my parents didn't let me watch TV or play video games, or which I didn't really have any interest in anyway. So I was mostly just like playing in the bush, building huts, or like riding horses or swimming, or so it was. Yeah, like really, definitely very privileged to have that kind of
It sounds like a
upbringing.
dream. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Did you
you're
start
like,
doing music? At what point did you get into music?
I started piano when I was 5. Actually, maybe a bit before that. Like we had my aunt gave us a piano of hers, and so I would just kind of like mess around with it. And then my parents were like, "Hey, let's get you lessons." And so I did that for like 5 or 6 years, and then my school also had like they offered individual lessons. So again, I was like really fortunate. I was able to try out like saxophone and violin, and I think even drums at one point. But yeah, I didn't pick up guitar till I was about 14, and that was when it stuck. And I was like, oh, I actually, I want to do something with this. I want to have a band, and
What made
yeah.
you kind of, I guess, go into guitar, switch into it from piano?
Um, I didn't really have a specific reason, and there was actually kind of a gap, like maybe a couple of years in between playing instruments. But I think just one day I was like, oh, I want to try this next, and but I always loved Brian May. Like I grew up listening to Queen and Bowie and Pink Floyd and all that. So
Yeah. And
probably
who kind of got you into that?
my parents, that was what
Yeah.
they listened to.
Hell yeah. What were your first sort of shows, or what were kind of like the first bands you were getting into at the time, when you first started? Or what was your first band?
I mean, I was listening to black metal, I guess. Like, I remember going to one of my first guitar lessons. I think I had like an Emperor CD and maybe Cradle Filth or something, and I was just like, I want to play this. And he was like, let's try Into Sandman first. Like, we'll start there. um, but
That's
yeah,
great.
so I sort of went backwards into metal. Like, I was listening to all this like extreme stuff, like war metal, like Conqueror, Revenge, um, and then like also Morbid Angel. What else? Also like Today Is the Day. I really love them. But yeah, so I was listening to all this sort of I guess more extreme stuff, and then eventually came back and was like, oh, that's Metallica or Megadeth or Slayer. Like I would like step back into the thrash. And then yeah, and then later on, I sort of expanded my tastes a bit, and I remember going on like a big Stevie Ray Vaughan kick for a while, like trying to learn all his stuff and play that on guitar.
When did you start, I guess, playing out? What was your first like show? What was your first sort of performance like?
That was when I was about 18, and it was a cover band. Like we just did metal songs. So we did like Sepultura, Slayer, Priest, Sabbath, because I tried to put together original bands before that, and nothing had really worked. Things would just fizz out. It's hard. Teenager doesn't always go well. um, but yeah, so eventually I was like, fuck it, I'll just grab some friends and we'll play covers and just have fun with it. And so we did like a few shows around the country, and um, yeah, and then
Around the whole country?
I mean, I think it was like 3 cities, maybe, like just the North Island.
Yeah, I guess it's
Uh,
not a very big place. How
yeah.
long does it take to drive across New Zealand?
I mean, Auckland to Wellington's about a 12-hour drive, or 10
Oh,
hours maybe, I think. And then South Island, that would take quite a bit longer. But
yeah.
um, yeah.
Cool. What were those first shows like? What were you just like hooked? You're like, this is something I want to do. Were you always
Yeah.
like, was that always like your mindset that you just want to be in a band and play shows out?
Yeah, pretty much since I started, that's just sort of been like the driving ambition.
Yeah. Were your parents always like, hell yeah, just gonna be a rock star? Was that the whole thing?
Not really. I
Well,
mean, that they're always supportive in what I wanted to do, but I don't think they were expecting me to do it for this long. And I remember being like 15, I'd only been playing for a year and putting flyers around town trying to start a band. And I was like, guitarist looking for band. And um, my mom was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't call yourself a guitarist. It's a bit misleading. And I was like, oh, thanks, mom. Supportive.
why'd you say that?
I think because, I'd only been playing for a year. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay, gotcha. That's pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
I remember
So,
I was at dinner with my mom and she was like, I was like, I want to learn drums. She's like, you don't really seem like a drummer. I was like, oh, well, yeah, fuck me then, right? I guess. Never mind.
right? Just like brutally honest, you know.
Yeah. And then she's like, oh, you're all right at this. Yeah. That's funny that you're had a similar experience to that.
Yeah.
Um, so then going from there, what was it like kind of moving to the States when and what was the driver for that for you?
I mean, I always wanted to leave the country. I mean, just kind of seeing like I had friends older than me, like even like bands like Ulcerate or Donna Bazazel. Um, you know, they were doing well and they would tour, but it was like it was just such an effort. Even just to leave the country, it's like you're spending thousands of dollars each before you even set foot here. So it just seemed easier to start in the States, or I was considering Europe as well, um, but yeah, I mean, just I actually I went on a couple of trips before moving. Like I went I think to Germany and Holland, and went to a few metal fests, and then went to America maybe a year or two later, and I was just kind of like scoping out where I wanted to move to, and it just seemed like people were doing more of what I wanted to here, like just kind of had more in common with the music scene, and like a lot of my favorite bands are based here, so it just sort of made more sense. And then obviously like the language barrier isn't there, which makes it easier. So
It does definitely make it easier. That's so then you decide to move to New York and I guess you kind of hit the ground running. Um
yeah, actually I moved to
my or was
Florida.
it Miami first?
Yeah, Miami.
Miami.
So yeah, that was where like I was playing in Geigen. They were based in Tampa. So we would like commute, like the other guitarist, he was in Fort Lauderdale as well, and so we drive to Tampa for rehearsal and then go touring. And that was right when I moved. I was only 21, and been in the country like maybe a month, and then I'm like out on the road in a van, and so it was like a really good boot camp, like right from the start.
Interesting. I also find it interesting that you went to Miami first. It doesn't really strike me as like an avant rock jazz metal scene.
Yeah,
Um
yeah, it's not not what you'd expect, eh?
yeah, I guess going to Miami when you're 21 sounds pretty fun though. I mean, what was why Miami first? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I had a boyfriend there, which was the main impetus, and then ended up playing the bands there. So, but originally my plan, I was like, yeah, I could go there for 6 months, and then I'll probably move, and then it ended up being 10 years. So,
That'll happen. And then
yeah, yeah,
so you moved here in 2018 though, correct?
yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, but well, welcome here. I guess you've been here for longer than me, but how so then what was it like getting into the New York scene? What was like kind of lockdown like for you? Because that's when you actually released the first album in 2020. Um, what was what was going on around that time getting you into this?
Yeah, so I mean, moving here just kind of made sense. Like when I was planning on getting out of Miami, like I realized I had more friends up here than any other city. So, and I'd also been flying up here for shows and rehearsal, and just seeing what was going on here was mind blowing. And I was like, I need to be here. Like this is amazing. There's so much stuff happening, and everyone was like super open minded and welcoming, and they're all like world class players. And um, so yeah, I came up, and I was telling a story about getting sort of meeting Trevor, Kenny, and Matt, and getting the band going. And we recorded the first album in like summer 2019, and we were getting everything set to roll out. And then um, had the vinyl and production and all that. And um, I guess we were sort of weighing up, like, do we wait this out, or do we just release it? And it just seemed like the right thing to do to put it out then, because um, no one had anything to do, and it seemed like there was actually a lot of focus on music and creatives, and people were being really supportive of the arts at that time. And so I think it ended up working out well. I mean, it was disappointing that we couldn't tour for it, but I think it still had the intended effect, and we were able to do like a live recording at least, like a
Yeah.
live video.
What was the recording process like? I guess for both albums, how'd you get into it? Because like you guys do some really awesome effects and stuff, different ways of recording, making stuff sound like it's coming from different directions.
Mhm.
Um, that's not like a easy thing to do. So where were you recording these, and how did that come about?
So we recorded both albums with Colin Marston in Woodhaven. Um, and his place is great because he has this big live tracking room. So we're able to like be in the room with each other, and because we have like a lot of visual cues too. So it's good if you can, have eye contact to do that. Um, I mean, as far as the panning, I mean, those are effects we sort of put in afterwards in the mix with Colin, and but also, having the separation of the instruments, like in the second album, like you have the two basses going, and
Mhm.
there's some parts where it's like intentionally, like we split the riff in two, so like it would start on the left, like say Trevor, and then go to the right with Matt playing it, and so there's some kind of like, I guess you'd call it like manual panning going on there. Um, but yeah, most of the time we would just play like the whole thing through. We'd try to play sort of like one take, play it live, and then go back in, edit, overdub if we needed to. There were a few times, we'd punch in a whole section together, but for the most part, we were trying to make it sound like a live, organic experience.
Yeah, and it sounds so. They sound both albums sound really big. I love that, and which is pretty cool because I mean, you recorded it live, being in the same room, but it definitely has that like very produced, awesome big sound for it. So it's pretty cool that you guys were able to get that effect playing live in a room as well. Um, yeah, they both sound so awesome. And you kind of just thinking about the spatial stuff. I mean, you also do your album covers. You paint.
Yeah,
So I mean, do you generally just think in visual or audio more, and kind of what's the overlap between your art, your visual art, and your music?
yeah, I'm definitely a very visual person. Like that kind of comes more naturally to me. So, um, like a lot of the time, like if I'm writing a song, I'll definitely have like a visual image of like the structure, or even just the way the music works, or the variations. Like an example I like to give a lot is Disintegration, which comes from actually Salvador Dali. Like his pieces, like you have the what's that one called? Sorry, I always forget this title. It's like they're the really famous one. The
The clocks, like that
yeah,
one.
like perception of memory or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Persistence of memory, maybe.
yeah.
Um, and then he has another version where it's like the disintegration of the perception of memory, persistence of memory, whichever. And it's like everything's kind of like it's coming apart, but it's like in little cubes and blocks. And I just kind of found that concept fascinating. And he has a few paintings like that. Like there's, I think, like a bust of Gala, and it's like sort of coming apart and floating off. And so musically, I like to do that with riffs. So this truck is like distracting me. It's
Yeah, I get
super
it. It's all good.
yeah. Wait for it to leave.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I sort of take the same concept with like a motif or a riff, and like we'll play it through, and then I'll say to everyone like, okay, imagine this is like pulling apart, and it's getting spaced out, and it's going different directions, and like just kind of play how that sounds. Or like to go to another Dali concept, like melting, like the melting clocks, and then you'll sort of start fucking with the time of the riff, and then maybe stretching, or making it sound kind of like warped, like maybe the record was melting, or you know.
Do you do you like do you read a lot? Is that what?
Yeah, I try to.
Yeah, I'm trying to wondering how to ask this. Your music is very like heady, and I'm curious about like what goes into like your daily consumption of weird topics, whether it be reading or art, or what does a day in the life look like for you on a good day creating?
Yeah, a good day. I mean, I like to read books like there was one in particular that was like really inspiring for me. That was The Holographic Universe. Because I mean that's a crazy book. Like it goes through so many different subjects, but but also like quantum physics too. Like just there was one book I got. It was called Enigma, I think, like the nine paradoxes in physics, and it's sort of like it takes you from like basic like Zeno's paradoxes, like basic principles, but it's I don't know. I just find it's like kind of trippy, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like
Is
it's
it
interesting.
written as more of a like science book, or is it like more of a I guess like written by a layman's terms for that sort of topic?
Yeah, I think that that book in particular is more like sort of layman's, but it does get more involved. Like some of them you have to read a few times to like wrap your head around it.
Yeah,
But that one was like a good introduction, um,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
to physics. And then
What's
there's a
the
bit,
deal with a holographic universe? That's a really cool title.
yeah. So that one, it's I guess it sort of starts off sort of based in neuroscience, like it's talking about how they're trying to figure out a theory of how the brain functions and like interprets information. And so um and again, I think this was written in the 90s maybe, so there's probably a lot of updated information on this, um but it was saying like if you have so like an actual hologram, it's made of all these like interference patterns or like refractions, but if you cut out one part of it, it still contains all the information of the whole. And it can still read that, like you can still shine a laser through it and it'll project the same image. And they were kind of equating that to how the brain works because they were finding that like experimenting in mice or whatever it was, like if they took out certain chunks of their brains, they would still be able to function the same way and retain memory. And they weren't like, it wasn't like you could just cut out that section. It's like, oh, this thing in particular stops working or you lost that one particular memory. So then they would kind of come up with this theory saying like the brain works in the same way, like one part contains the information of the whole. Um, and it's all just like interpreting frequencies, you know, like everything is a frequency, everything's just these little particles moving, like nothing's actually solid, like when you get down to the quantum level. Um, and then so you're saying like, okay, you have these like color frequencies and audio coming at you, um and then in the way where like so just say if you have a camera, it's taking a photo of this like the color frequencies, and then it's converting that information and then sending it to like the computer or whatever. But then there's another sort of philosophical question where it's like, is it taking a photo of like what's actually there is actually a frequency, like is it literally just these squiggly lines we're looking at, and then our brain changes it to see like actual solid objects, and you know. um but yeah, I mean it gets pretty deep into things, but then it also talks about how because everything is made of these frequencies, like even your brain signals have the power, like it's still energy. And it this is mostly like theorizing, it's not necessarily something that's true, or maybe if you believe it or whatever it is, but like it talks about how back in the day you had all these miracles where people just by pure thought, you know, like people could make things happen. Like I think it's the Jansenites or something. There was like these sort of sects that like would come together. Actually, this is an area for Trevor as well. Like his trio Convulsion is kind of like based on this theme of like the convulsionaries and the Jansenites. And you would have these seances where like they would go into convulsions and like perform miracles, and just through this sheer power of belief and like changing your thought processes. And um so it's I don't know, it's sorry, I'm getting all rambly again, but like
No,
it's
no.
yeah,
I'm just
it's
piecing that together. I love stuff like this. I used to love
yeah.
reading like Alan Watson and all that.
Oh
Um,
right. but
yeah,
um but yeah, I guess the point is like just showing how like how your thought processes can shape the world around you. um and it's kind of like tying into the collective consciousness theory. And also there's actually another documentary, it was called Heal, but it talks about similar things. This I think this came out maybe a year or two ago, but it talks about like even in modern times, like people just using that power of like thought and meditation to like focus on healing themselves, like just sort of fixating. Like there was this one guy that had like I think crushed vertebra or something, and he just sort of like meditated every night on like what actually needed to be rebuilt and was able to heal himself. And Um, so I don't know, that kind of thing. It's just like fascinating to read about or like
Yeah, I
watch.
mean, I absolutely believe that people can, will something into their body. I mean, you can kind of like make a certain part of your body feel warm if you want. If you start really focusing on being like nervous or whatever, you can make your hands and your face like
Right.
warm. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very basic version of that, but I don't think it's a super far stretch to just think like, yeah, maybe we can heal ourselves a little bit. It's
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, because you hear like all these everyday stories of like, people are fine until you tell them they have cancer, and then they go downhill because they're like, oh shit, I'm sick. And then they're telling their body they're sick. And, there's like a lot of everyday applications to just like your mindset and your inner, narrative.
Absolutely. Yeah, to some
Yeah,
extent, like you do have to kind of give up to die. Of course, there's different situations for everybody, but
for sure.
just kind of how it goes. Sometimes that's the best way, out. Um, do you
Yeah.
have any interesting like have you been to a lot of museums in New York? Do you have any recommendations, any libraries or anything that you like to go to?
Man, I should really go out more. um, yeah, yeah, it's that whole thing where you live somewhere and you're like, I can do it anytime, and then you never do anything. But actually, no, um, I went to MoMA was probably the last one, which I loved. I mean, there was so many amazing paintings there, and
Yeah.
um, like Remedios Varo, I think I remember seeing a couple of her works in there, Van Gogh, and like I don't know, it was just incredible. Like,
Yeah.
um, uh,
I love that. Well, that's funny. For some reason I pegged you as somebody to be like going out to these like crazy art exhibits all the time, but no, that's all right.
yeah, I mean, I mostly just go out to like music shows and
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah. But,
What how do you tie in like these concepts you're kind of like learning or just reading about in these books, and how do you tie that into your music? Because there's definitely something there. So how do you visually think about a song? I guess you were kind of mentioning, Dolly's clocks painting, which I don't know if we have the right name for that yet.
yeah,
But
I'm pretty sure.
how do you think about that?
Um, oops. Yeah, so it, oh, sorry, I thought it froze for a second.
I think it is. We're
Um,
good.
yeah, it's really this visual thing where, um, like to go to the holographic thing, like these ripples or interference patterns. I mean, that was partially what inspired the cover for Vonals. Um, it's I don't know, it's almost like a synesthesia type of thing where
Mhm.
you're imagining like how would it look if I played a ripple, or how would it sound if I played a ripple, Um, and so that's kind of like on a smaller level where you're just for writing like motifs, I guess. But then like the overall structure of a piece, like I usually look more to science fiction, like to have an actual narrative to figure out where the dynamics are and with like tension and releases, and so just kind of thinking of like storylines or sort of imagining ones that really helps me more, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely noticed that with your music. You'll come back to like a main theme sometimes in such a dramatic way as it is you are trying to tell a bigger story. Like it's a kind of, the hero's quest of like trying to go out doing some crazy shit and then coming back to like a riff, you know. Uh
Yeah,
I is
yeah,
something I noticed.
that's
That's
cool.
super cool. Um what so you've been in New York for a little while. And you guys are going on tour
Mhm.
soon. Um, Pretty stoked out. It looks like you have 6 dates. The last one being at St. Vitus Bar, but as
Mhm.
we now know, I don't know if that's going to be at that venue anymore because they had some shit
Yeah,
go down. Do you have any idea
yeah,
where it's going to be that, or any thoughts on that?
yeah. We're waiting to hear if that's going to be moved. Yeah, it's a real shame what's happening there. I mean, it sounds like it's one specific person's just put in a bunch of complaints over the years. Just sort of has a bone to pick, unfortunately. But um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so
been like 7 years or something like that. I read somewhere
yeah,
where he's the guy just out for blood and just wants to close
yeah,
down
yeah. It's like just move, like
or
leave
just
them
don't
alone.
go there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So hopefully they get that resolved and can reopen. And hope, I mean, worst case, maybe they change venues, locations, but
Yeah, I'm seeing Author and Punisher next weekend, and yeah, they had to change it to Meadows.
all
Um,
right.
yeah, that's such a shame.
Yeah.
What other sort of bands are what's like a favorite band of yours to kind of like check out in New York City if you have to go? Is there a band that you've seen most around here?
Um, wow, it's hard to think of actually. um, I can't really say what I've seen the most, but there's so Brandon Seabrook has this ensemble called Ditrom Fatale that I really loved. They have a couple of records out, I think. So I try whenever they play, I try to go see it because it's just incredible. Um, and yeah, I always love checking out my friends' stuff as well. And
Yeah,
uh,
awesome. What about
yeah,
any New Zealand bands to shout out?
yeah. So my mates in Ulcerate were just here, um, like November, December. So they're definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. On a totally different side of music, there's Fat Freddy's Drop is a great band.
Awesome.
I came across this one dragon that were like I think from the 70s or 80s, and like they have they have like all these hits that were on the radio when I was a kid, and I didn't even know it was a New Zealand band, but like for some reason I just got back into them lately and been listening to that.
That's cool. So it's
Yeah.
like what do you think is like do you have any guilty pleasure music, or is there a band that people would be surprised to hear that you listen to?
I don't believe in guilty pleasures, particularly not with music. But,
Great.
uh, I mean, I love Amy Winehouse. I don't know how surprising that is, but yeah, like Rick James, Prince.
Oh, yeah.
Just trying to think of stuff that's not metal or jazz.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
you got the underlying point of that question.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Well, what's going on next for you all? Besides the tour, like what do you kind of have your irons in the fire doing? Are you recording another album? What's going on?
yeah. So once we get back from Big Airs, definitely going to go into writing mode again, work on that, and we're working on getting to Europe later in the year. Um, so if anyone feels like helping with that, that would be great. Um, but yeah, I mean, we have some stuff in place that'll hopefully work out later in November to get there. Um, but yeah, mostly just writing and maybe book some more local shows, I guess.
I should probably know this, but are you part of a label or are you part of a management? Do you have or are you all self going right now?
Yeah, we had the last record was on Sardic, and then before that Nefarious Industries. But so now technically we're just independent, I guess, till we figure out what to do on the next one.
Yeah. Have you guys been writing for that? Whatever
Sorry?
have you been writing for your next album?
Yeah, slowly. So I
Slowly.
definitely
Yeah.
like yeah, I mean Vonals was like a really intense process. Like I did everything in I think it was about 18 months, including all the cover art and everything. And I just so definitely like needed a break after that. And now I'm getting back into things.
For sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It also seems like you're pretty good at taking breaks from stuff when you need to and like focusing on something else. Good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. You have to do those like creative resets, you know?
Yeah. How often do you guys practice? I mean, because this music, like you said, there's a lot of like visual cues. There's a lot of like songs are long and they go all over the place. How often do you guys have to practice, or do you send stuff back and forth more with each other? Is that how you work? What does that process look like for you?
I mean, we really don't practice unless we have a show, just because of everyone's schedules. But you know, like they're all such amazing musicians that it's like they do their homework and they come prepared to rehearsal. So I feel like that's enough, you know. But then if we're writing, like we'll get together as often as we can, and sometimes I'll record just get demos of the guitar and send to people in advance. But most of the time we'll just get there in the room and I'll show them the riff and work from that.
It's pretty cool. So how long does it? So I guess if they just practice along with the music themselves or listen to it, how long does it take you to get in like to be able to play a show? Like a few weeks, just a few practices? I'm just really curious about this for your style of music.
Um, that's a good question because I think when we were writing Vonals, we weren't really. I don't think we had many shows on at that point, so occasionally we'd like, if we did, we'd like try out whatever new song we were working on. Um, I think like, I mean, me personally, the process for that album was like, I think I was writing a song every 2 months, and then we'd take it to the band and kind of like wrap it up, refine it. So
That's awesome. So I have a question I ask everybody on the show. I've been getting some interesting answers lately. Because I have a part two for it now, or just a subsection of it. What do you do if you experience imposter syndrome, or where you're like kind of stacking yourself up against somebody else, thinking about that, or do you just in general not really see that as something part of your life? I always like to, for artists, I like to see how other artists get through this sort of aspect of it.
yeah, I mean, I definitely had that pretty bad when I got here and was like going out and like doing free improv shows and um, like because I felt like I was playing with all these heavyweights and I'm just like, who the fuck am I? I don't know what I'm doing, Um, but I guess I just kind of embraced that. Like I always like to push myself out of my comfort zone because like taking risks is how you grow, and so if I was feeling uncomfortable like that, I would just try to like embrace that nervous energy and be like, no, this is a good thing. Like you're in the right place, and just try and learn in each situation.
Like you got there for a reason, or to some extent, and you just need to just go through it with whatever you're feeling on the inside. That kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
you.
yeah. And so you have to do a lot of sort of self-talk, be like, no, it's fine. They've asked you to be here, or it's okay, or like whatever the situation is. But I think, yeah, I think definitely like if you're feeling uncomfortable musically, it's always a growth experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. What sort of recommendations do you have for books or movies or anything that, I mean, you've mentioned quite a few today, and I have them written down, but is there anything that you're into right now that other people should check out, or
Yeah,
music?
so yeah. um, on books, The Jazz of Physics is a great book. It's by Stefan Alexander, who's a saxophone player from Queens. That's a really good one where it kind of like marries those two subjects, like quantum physics and free jazz improvising. Like he has a lot of really good visual analogies. Um, and for let me see, movies, other things. I always go blank when people ask me that. Like I know these like a million.
What's like the last like album or something that you listen to, or something that's getting stuck in your head right now? Something you've been listening to back to back.
Um, that record, it's just called Four, like in Roman numerals by Bad Bad Not Good. That's one I have on all the time. Like I love that record.
I love them. I saw them live once. They were great.
Oh,
I think
amazing.
I don't think I've checked. They're super prolific.
Yeah, yeah.
Every time I like look, I'm like, oh, haven't heard them in a while. They have like 9 new albums. I'm like, and with
Oh,
like so many different like people. And I'm like, Jesus, guys, like slow down.
cool.
Um, that's cool. And yeah, it seemed like you're pretty interested in jazz in general. So, well, obviously, but I guess like more of like kind of the old school or just like more lo-fi jazz. I'm that's something I'm trying to get more into lately, just because I've been noticing myself enjoying it more. Do you have any like classic jazz albums that people should listen to?
I mean, I'm really not the person to ask this. Like
No?
I'm only just getting into it myself really over the last few years. But I don't know. I mean, like I guess like Ornette is one that comes to mind. Like I mean, a good starting point with him is The Shape of Jazz to
Mhm.
come. And then also Chick Corea. What's that one? Now he sobs, now he sings. I think is that the title? Yeah. Just I mean anything by Chick, like I love to listen to, and you'll kind of like just play along jam to that, and you know,
Yeah.
helps me with ideas. Um,
Yeah. Well, hell yeah. Anything else? Anything else come to mind? That people should check out?
yeah, just check out our tour dates. Like we're going from New York to Knoxville and back, so catch us somewhere on the way if you can.
Hell yeah. And yeah, we'll definitely see you in, wherever you end up playing in Brooklyn. And that's going to be the 28th of March. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great
Yeah,
chatting.
keep it going. You rock. Have a good day, all right?
Thanks, you too.
Hey, for the love of God, please subscribe to our Patreon for like $1 a month. That would help out a lot. Podcasts are, fun fact, really expensive to run, and I really enjoy doing this. So if you want to keep on seeing stuff like this, help me out. Also, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.